What happens when the great Australian dream becomes a financial nightmare? Now, in 2025, buying your home has become less of a rite of passage and more a high-stakes gamble for many young Australians. Record high deposits, sky-high property prices, mortgage repayments eating up more than 30% of buyers' income. It's no wonder that half of all first-home buyers now regret their decision. So today I'm joined by Sarah Megginson, a personal finance expert at Finder, and she was behind the first home buyer report that Finder brought out. And this was a survey of 1,000 first home buyers revealing the rising pressure on young Australians trying to break into the property market, from paying well above budget to being left with no savings after settling their property. Now, even if you're not a first home buyer at the moment, whether you're an investor, a parent wanting to help your kids buy the property, or just curious about where our housing markets are heading, I think you should stick around because this is one of the episodes that may well shift your perception, your perspective, I guess, of the housing markets, because we're going to dive into what's really going on, why buyer remorse is soaring, how affordability is vanishing, and what this means for future home ownership in Australia. So again, if you're interested in property, we've got some great messages for you. So let's get on with the show.
Welcome to the Michael Yardney podcast, where twice each week you will learn a number of new ideas regarding success, property investment and money in around 30 minutes. Our show is brought to you by Metropole, who specialise in helping you grow, protect and pass on your wealth through strategic property and wealth advice. Now here's your host, Michael Yardney, Australia's authority in wealth creation through property, who has been voted one of Australia's top 50 most influential thought leaders.
Now, reading through Finder's first home buyer report, I kept thinking it's tough out there for first home buyers at the moment.
It really is. It's tougher than it's ever been. And I know we keep saying that every year. We keep saying how hard it is for first home buyers. And in fact, when I first started as a finance journalist 20 odd years ago, we were saying back then, this is the hardest time first home buyers have ever had of trying to buy a home. So it's not a new story, but it is getting more and more unaffordable for first home buyers to get into the property market. This is the first time we've done this report in 3 years. We last did it in 2022, and that was really fascinating to see some of the shifts and changes that have happened in that time. And one of the biggest shifts that we noticed is how much harder it is to buy a first home if you're trying to buy it by yourself. So back in 2017, so about 8 years ago, if you wanted to buy a home by yourself, around 40% of the suburbs across Australia were affordable for you to buy a home. And now that has dropped to just 16%. So that really is such a tiny window of affordability for solo first home buyers. Obviously, if you're buying in partnership with someone and you've got that extra income to support the loan, you've got more options available to you. But we are definitely seeing a really, really big shift in affordability for first home buyers, making it even harder than it has ever been to get onto the property market.
Well, I guess that's a combination of slightly higher interest rates, even though they're falling a bit, definitely higher prices around much of Australia. You surveyed over 1,000 buyers, and I want to get into the Finder report in a moment, and I'll put a link in the show notes to it, Sarah. But was there any particular statistic or story that shocked you, that stood out for you, that surprised you with this report?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I think there were lots of really fascinating parts of it, but one of the stats or the trends that really did surprise me was how much people are leaning on their parents. The bank of mum and dad is getting right up there with the big four banks as being a major lender, because almost 1 in 5 first home buyers said that they needed to use support from their family to get into the market, and that has increased a lot as well. That used to be 1 in 10 just a few years ago. Now it's 1 in 5, and that obviously gives you a huge head start if you have access to that. That's amazing. If you don't have access to that, then it's an even harder journey to get into the property market. It was on average, first home buyers who don't have access to Bank of Mum and Dad are going to be saving for at least 5 years for a deposit, and you get to fast track that if you've got some financial support from your family. So, that's a trend.
It also lowers the long-term commitment of a mortgage that some people don't realise. If already the first couple of 100,000 or 100,000, 150,000 is so-called paid off, it shortens the length of your loan too, doesn't it?
Oh, that's exactly right. There's so many benefits to it. You don't have to save as long for your deposit. Your loan amount isn't as high. I mean, depending, some people do get their parents' help going as a guarantor, which is a different pathway, which can be really useful as well. But that means that you're still going to have that higher loan amount. Your parents are just guaranteeing your repayments. But I think however your parents help or family members can help you is a real benefit, obviously, but it's just not something that's available to everyone. So I always like to, when we have these conversations about first home buyers, I think it is fantastic. There's absolutely no shame. If your family can help you, then you should absolutely take that help. But I always like to look at what the options are for the broader community if you don't have that access. What can you do to try and get into your own home if that's what your goal is?
Well, get into that in a moment. Now, when you worked out affordability, we know what incomes are. How do you decide what sort of property is affordable or not? Are you looking at the median house price, or what did Finder research?
Yeah, that's right. We look at average incomes. So the average income in Australia right now is around $101,000. The average, of course, is very different to the median when it comes to incomes. I think the median sits more like around 85,000. But for this, we took the average. We then look at average house prices across Australia. The average house price Australia-wide right now is something in the vicinity of $650,000. And so we take those two averages to see if you were on an average income and you were buying an average priced house, what would that affordability be? And obviously, even just saying those figures, at $650,000, there are a number of suburbs and neighbourhoods that are just immediately off the list. Well, in fact, almost over 8 out of 10 suburbs are off the list because that price point doesn't get you very far in inner city areas. So yeah, that's part of the methodology. We've got a team of data scientists at Finder who put all of this information together and figure it out. They're very, very clever. So yeah, that's kind of the methodology of how we figure out what affordability means.
So you found the 60% of suburbs are affordable for the average buyer. I guess one comment, and I'm going to annoy some people by saying that, is, well, maybe you shouldn't expect to own the sort of house that it took your parents 30 or 40 years to be able to afford an average price home. I know I started in a small apartment, and I know we've known each other for over close to 20 years. You didn't start off in the sort of family home that you've got today either. But one of the things I found interesting in your report was that 45% of recent first home buyers regretted their purchase. 1 in 2 almost. What's going on?
Yeah, it is a really, really high figure and not what we were expecting to find either. And interestingly, we broke it down into people who had bought a private treaty regular sale versus people who had bought at auction. And 77% of people who bought at auction said they actually regretted it. And I think what's driving this trend is that sense of FOMO that happens. There are so few homes that are affordable for first home buyers. And when they hit the market, there's a feeding frenzy of people trying to get into it. And I think it means that people make concessions. They either make concessions on what it is that they want or, what they're willing to buy. It might be, say that they really, really wanted off-street parking was non-negotiable, but in the end they buy something that doesn't have any parking because that's all they could find. And so they have regrets over that because, once you're then living in it, you have to figure out how to move forward with the amenities you've got. And I think it's also related to price. So many people confirmed that they spent more than they were planning to. And this goes back to what you were saying before. If you do have financial support getting into the property market, then you don't your mortgage isn't going to be as high and your repayments aren't going to be as high for the long term. Well, conversely, if you overspend at the beginning and you pay more than you were planning to, your mortgage repayment is going to be higher and it could take you longer to pay it off. So there's a lot of regret around the financial aspect of it as well.
Let's just dig into that a bit more. Your statistics showed that half of buyers paid more than they'd budgeted, and 1 in 5 spent $50,000 more than planned. I guess that's going to have a financial ripple effect on their household. Their mortgages are going to cost more, but they're probably going to also run out of that very important financial buffer, that savings buffer that you've got there in case things go wrong.
Yeah, you're right. 1 in 5 said they went $50,000 over budget, and 1 in 10 said they went $100,000 over budget,
Wow.
which is a staggering amount of money. And hopefully, with interest rates coming down this year, that might help alleviate some of that financial pressure. But it really is, it's a big amount of money because it's such an ongoing cost. It's not just like that was at the beginning, you had to find extra money. That's your mortgage repayment every single month for the next few decades is much higher because of that. And I think that it's driven by that FOMO and that feeling that we've got to get into the market at all costs. And we've had for a number of years, particularly in Sydney, but also in other cities, where prices just keep going up and up and up each year. So first home buyers are chasing that deposit goal. They might have a deposit goal of aiming to get $80,000. And once they've saved $80,000, actually the market has moved and now you need 90,000. So they work another 6 months, save that extra bit, and now the market has moved and you actually need 100,000. And so the goalposts have shifted for them so much that I think when you're in that zone and you're ready to buy, there comes a point where you just go, I'm just going to throw everything at it, even if it pushes us to our brink financially. And that's why we have such a huge proportion of first home buyers who say that they are regretting their decision.
Now, before people get too depressed, I'm going to ask you as a money expert what people can do to get in the market and save a deposit. So there is some good news at the end. But as you were discussing this, I was thinking of my osteopath. I've got a bit of a bad back and I'm seeing Jonathan, who I think listens to this podcast, but no one will know who he is. So I can say that he's been with his partner looking for 7 months, and the Melbourne market hasn't grown that much, but at the lower end of the market, it actually has grown significantly in the nice areas he's looking at, and he keeps missing out every time he goes to auctions. By the way, I've suggested a good buyer's agent, somebody to level the playing field would help, but a lot of first home buyers don't think they can afford that because it's coming out of their budget. But he's at the point where they're, I guess, getting pretty desperate. So they're going to just make a decision, and they had a whole list of what they want. And
Yes.
now they're actually crossed off most of those things. They just want to get in the market. And I can understand why by doing that, they're going to regret it down the track. I guess we always have to make compromises, don't we, Sarah?
Yeah, and I think that story you've shared there is just a common story across the board, and it is so all-encompassing too. When you're looking for a home, it's every weekend, going to the open homes, it's checking online every day to see what the new listings are, and it's calling agents, and it just becomes so fatiguing. At the beginning, it's a very exciting journey. When you get 6 months down the track, and all the joy is sapped out of it, and you're exhausted, and you just want to get in. And that's it's I think it's really frustrating for first home buyers because it's meant to be a really joyful rite of passage and this wonderful milestone, but it does become really, really stressful. One thing you touched on there too is auctions. Auctions just add so much more stress to the situation. And I can understand, certainly when I was buying my first home and my first investment properties, the idea of using a buyer's agent to me just seemed so far-fetched. Like I couldn't afford it. And why would I spend money when I can just do it myself? And then you kind of, as you get older, you realize the value. It's not always just a financial value, even though, using a buyer's agent, they can negotiate on your behalf and there might be a financial benefit. It's really about the emotional, what you buy back for yourself emotionally. It's being able to hand that to someone else and say, this is what I want. Now it's your problem. You go find it.
Well, it levels the playing field because the agent knows 5 or 6 things about the property that he's not going to tell you about, nor will he tell you that the company with the yellow logo down the road's got something that's just right for you. So basically, you need somebody who speaks their language and also is an expert negotiator, because agents understand how to, their job is to represent the seller, the vendor.
Yeah.
That's their job. They get paid to get the best price. So I guess one mistake some beginning investors make, or home buyers make, is thinking the agent's on their side when they say, I'm going to look after you. Their job's to get the best deal for the client. Their client's obviously the seller. Interestingly, it must be much harder for solo buyers as opposed to couples.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was talking about before. Like if you're a solo buyer, it really is challenging. Only 16% of suburbs are affordable for the average single buyer across Australia. And in the capital cities, that number shifts even more. In Sydney, it's 11%. And in Melbourne, I think it's 14%. So it is really hard for first home buyers, but the market has changed a lot in the last decade or so, really, really shifted. So it is difficult, but I also don't want people to think it's impossible, because even though it is the most unaffordable it's ever been. We also actually have the most incentives and grants and schemes that we've ever had available to first home buyers. And I can run through some of them.
Yes, I think it would be worthwhile. In fact, each government's coming up with something to outdo the others. The
Yes.
Queensland government has recently given even more incentives. So let's go through some of those options that the government is helping first home buyers in the short term, even though you and I have discussed before that that's helping this group of first home buyers. But all that does by giving them more money is keep property values high or push them up a bit to make it more difficult for the next generation.
That's exactly right. If you're giving everyone a leg up, you're just going to create much more demand in that price point. But as a first home buyer, you've just got to focus on what's in front of you. And so what your options are. The first thing, I guess, to understand is that the government really wants to stimulate new housing because we have such a massive housing shortage. So their biggest goal is to make sure that new houses are built. So all of the grants are designed around stimulating new housing. So there is a state by state first home buyers grant. It depends where you live, what you'll get. And it also depends if you're in a capital city or regional. Usually regional markets get a little bit more. And they can be worth up to $20,000. And that grant is available as long as you're buying either a block of land you intend to develop on or you are buying a brand new home. So first home buyers grants are the first place to start. You then also want to look at lenders' mortgage insurance. That is something that you'll pay when your deposit is less than 20%. But there's a scheme, federal scheme. It's called now, I think it's called the First Home Guarantee. And that gives you the ability to borrow with just a 5% deposit and you'll pay no lender's mortgage insurance. And that has a really massive value attached to it.
So, Sarah, we spoke about the bank of mum and dad being one way of people getting in, and almost 20,000 first home buyers a year are lucky enough to be able to receive financial assistance from their parents. But over the last little while, various governments, the federal government and state governments, have introduced incentives to help first home buyers as well. Now, we've spoken about that before, Sarah, that when they bring in these incentives, all it does is allow people to, it helps a current group of people get into the market, but it keeps prices steady, if not pushing them up, making it harder for the next generation.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's right. When we have all of this stimulus to help people get into the market at a certain price point, it just adds a lot of demand to that price point and puts pressure on prices and they go up. So it's not ideal, but I always do say for first home buyers, just focus on what you want and what your goals are. Stay in your own lane. So if you are a first home buyer, what can you do or what's available to you? We'll start with the federal or the national options.
Yes, please.
And that is one of the first ones is called the First Home Guarantee. And that actually means you can buy with a deposit of only 5%. So normally if you have less than 20%, you have to pay lender's mortgage insurance. And that is a very high insurance premium. On an average, say if you were buying a home worth $800,000 and you had a 10% deposit, you might be spending $15,000 to $20,000 on lender's mortgage insurance. So it's a really, really
Just
big
to make
premium.
it clear, it doesn't insure you. It insures the bank. So if you can't keep up with your mortgage, they will pay the banks out. The bank will sell up your property. Fortunately, that happens very, very rarely.
Very rarely,
It's got to be
yes.
important to understand. And then they're going to come and pursue you for the difference anyway. One of the really good things, though, is that we have very, very few mortgage defaults. In Australia, people would rather eat Maggi noodle than give up their home.
That's right. And also, I used to really, at the beginning of my property journey, I really struggled with the LMI for exactly that reason. I thought, this is really unfair. It's protecting the bank. It's not protecting me. But I really did have a mindset shift with it when I realized without LMI, I would never have been able to buy a property. Creates reassurance for the bank. They're saying, look, you're a big risk to us. If you've only got a 5 or a 10% deposit and the market turns and you stop paying your repayments and we have to sell the property really quickly, we risk losing a ton of money. So this insurance gives them that reassurance. So anyone, first home buyers or otherwise, anyone who's buying a property and they have less than 20% deposit, they're going to pay LMI, except if you're a first home buyer and you're eligible for the first home guarantee, it means the government will guarantee that for you. So that is a
If I
really
could
big
just
saving.
interrupt for a second, because I agree with you in principle that the LMI is a fee for entering the market, not a fine for entering the market. So if you accept it as just a cost like stamp duty and other things that are a nuisance. It's not a fine. Don't look at it negatively. If it's what you need to do to get in, that's what you've
It's
got
a
to
really
do.
good way to put it. I mean, without LMI, I never would have been able to buy my first or my second properties. And they're the ones that got me the start to be able to end up in my home now. So I think if you can mentally get right with it, you'll be fine. But also, if you're eligible, fantastic. The government is going to take care of that for you. So
Yes.
that's the first really big national availability. Then you have when you're saving your deposit, it's a mouthful, and I always get it a bit confused, but it's something like the first home saver super scheme. And this is a way where you can save your deposit within your super fund.
Mm-hmm.
And it gives you lots of tax benefits for doing so. So you can save a certain amount per year over a number of years. Let's just say you do it for 3 years, you save in your super fund over 3 years, and 3 years later, you can take all of that money out. And it's hopefully been increasing in value in your super. And you've also had the tax benefits along the way. So you'll get a lot further with your deposit doing that than you would just whacking it in a savings account. And so that's really worth looking into as well. Then at the state level, you have first homeowners grants, which vary depending on where you live, but all of them are designed to stimulate new housing supply. So you'll find that most first home buyers grants, or in fact all first home buyers grants, are tied to building a new home. So you either need to buy a block of land with an intention to build on it, or you are buying a brand new home because the government really wants to encourage new housing supply. So those grants are worth, depending on where you live, they can be $10,000 if you're in regional areas where there's even greater demand for new home buyers. You can get up to $20,000 depending on where you live. And that's like a cash amount that you get towards paying for the home. And you also have stamp duty waivers and exemptions depending on where you live. Queensland just recently changed our stamp duty rules for first home buyers, where they used to be very strict thresholds, and there would be a threshold on the value of the property. So it had to be under, say, $750,000. And Queensland has just recently made a few changes actually for first home buyers. So the stamp duty threshold for first home buyers is now, I'm not sure if it has just changed. Did it happen on the first? So
It was
now
coming into at the time of recording. It was pre-announced going to happen. I don't think it's come in just yet, but it's going to. Up to $1 million.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes, it's actually, I'm just doing a very quick Google. I think it was May the 1st. If you're in Queensland, Google it to find out exactly what it is. But they have shifted their stamp duty concession, meaning that there is no stamp duty payable on contracts that you enter into after May the 1st this year.
Oh, yes.
And they also, the first homeowners grant in Queensland is actually up to $30,000 now. It's massive. You've got, wherever you are, I would look at the three main things I would look at is what is the stamp duty concession or waiver I can get? What is the first homeowners grant I can get? And what is the LMI waiver I can get? Because if you put all of those pieces together, it could actually make home ownership really affordable. And actually, I spoke to someone in Sydney just a couple of weeks ago who was able to buy their first home. And she said, I thought it was completely out of reach. And then using all of these grants and things, she realized they were able to buy a home. It was just over $800,000, and they saved her and her partner saved a deposit of $43,000. So it was 5%. Their mortgage is around $760,000, which is quite high, but it also was very comparable to what they were paying in rent. They got the stamp duty waiver, they got the LMI waiver, and they were able to buy with that 5% deposit. So I think I really like stories like that because it shows you what's possible if you take advantage of all of these different grants and incentives you can bring them all together, use as many as you're eligible for, and try to make home ownership really possible for you.
As a money guru, I'm sure that you also advise people to get into a savings habit. So to get all these incentives but not have good money habits is more likely to get you into some financial problems. In Finder's report, you looked at what first home buyers were doing to save that deposit and how that's changed over the last couple of years. What were your findings there?
Yeah, it's interesting with savings because, of course, buying a home is about so much more than just getting into it. Once you are a homeowner, the cost of owning a home is substantially more than renting. You've got,
Yes.
if you buy an apartment, you've got strata fees, but you've always got council rates and water and repairs. It all adds up. So it's a really good idea to get into the habit of putting a couple of $100 a week aside to deal with all of those things. Whatever your pay is, making sure you're putting some money aside so that when those bills come, you've got that money ready to go. In our report, we asked people, after you've bought your home, and especially, finding that people have spent more than they'd planned, after that, how much have you got left in savings? And 1 in 7 said they actually had nothing left in the bank after they had purchased. So that actually puts you in quite a risky position because you don't have that, financial safety net to just help you deal with those unexpected expenses that crop up. I can remember for me personally in my, wasn't my first home, it was my second home, but very quickly the hot water system just stopped working. And it was almost $2,000 to replace it. And at that time, that was just all the money in the world to me. And it wiped out our savings to be able to pay it. And I just remember thinking, God, no one warned me of this. No one warned me that this stuff can happen. I just was so unprepared of how expensive it is to own a home. So it is a really good idea especially if you've been in that habit of saving for a deposit, you hopefully got some really good habits going with your savings and you've made some good sacrifices. Just making sure you keep that savings habit going and you've got yourself a nice buffer to deal with anything that can go wrong. And I've been a homeowner for over 20 years and I have had the full range of things, hot water systems. I've had plumbing issues. My least favorite are plumbing and electrical issues that happen somewhere buried in your home and you don't actually notice until they stop working. And then thousands of dollars later, it just restores it back to where it was. I've had very deep leaks in property where I've had to have, get someone out to search for the leak that costs thousands of dollars to repair, all sorts of frustrating issues. And I've come to learn that that is all part and parcel of owning a home. And I used to get very frustrated by it and think, oh, this is so unfair. And then I realized, well, this is you can't have just all sunshine and lollipops all the time and have the security and the fun and the joy of owning a home without having the other side, which is the maintenance and the upkeep and the cost. So it is really important to make sure that you're going into it with your eyes wide open and you're fully kind of prepared for what the journey of home ownership entails. And I often think of buying a home as it's similar to having a baby. Like buying the home is the pregnancy, saving it is the pregnancy. And then you give birth and you have this, now you've got your home baby and now your real journey starts. You've got to look after it and maintain it.
That's an interesting analogy. In your report, you found that a lot of people are living at home with their parents. They're spending a bit less on eating and drinking on, discretionary items. And many ended up taking a second job, Uber drivers, delivery drivers, online businesses. So people are doing whatever they can to save that deposit at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. I think people are really willing to work hard to get into the property market. And I think that whole idea of, give up your smashed avocado on toast, that whole sentiment is quite misguided because young people are really motivated. And we do see a lot of people taking on second jobs, working in the gig economy or working in hospitality and things to try and just save money and get ahead and get their deposit together. So we're seeing a number of people, well, I think our stats showed that there's been an increase. So back in 2022, 15% of people said they took on a second job. That's now increased to 17%. And 1 in 5 people say they are spending less on eating out and drinking so that they can funnel that money towards their deposit. So people are really, if they're really motivated and they've got that really clear goal, they're really putting everything into this. And I think that should be really applauded because the one part of the story that I think people also don't often give enough attention to is the fact that when I was buying my first home and when you were buying your first home, Michael, all those years ago, the opportunity to spend money was much lower than it is now. You had to go to a shop and you had to be really intentional about spending. Whereas now we are getting sold to every second of the day. When you're in social media, when you're in your emails getting EDMs, on your phone, you're getting text messages about sales, when you're out and about, the buses and the billboards, like every single aspect of our life is saturated with messages telling you to buy things. And it's very easy at 11 o'clock at night on a Tuesday to just swipe through and click a few things and suddenly you've ordered something off Amazon that you don't really need. So, I think when older people, and I include myself in that that bracket when people say, oh, well, back in my day, I just had more discipline and we didn't waste our money on smashed avocado. I think that's a little bit disingenuous, because I think if you're plus in this situation with all of these temptations, we might find it a little bit harder to save as well.
Well, there weren't even credit cards when I first started. And I remember that if you wanted to get something and couldn't afford it, you went to the shop and put a lay-by. They'd put it
Labor.
aside and you'd go each week and put a couple of dollars there, or pounds,
Yeah.
shillings and pence. And then eventually when you'd paid it off, they gave it to you. A lot of people did that for Christmas. Today, though,
Yep.
as you say, there are so many temptations. Just to round things off, how are buyers adapting in this current environment? Are they changing where they're looking at, locations, dwelling types? What are they doing differently to get into the market?
Yeah, I think there's a wide range of things people are doing there. Obviously, anyone that has access to that family support, they're definitely leaning on that. But a lot of people are also looking elsewhere, whether that means moving to a regional area or moving to a different, more affordable city. But also, a number of people in the report said that they are looking at that rent vesting strategy, where you buy in a completely different state or city where it's more affordable, and then you continue living where you want to live. That is something that I actually did. It wasn't my first home, it was my second home. But my first home I had bought in far north regional Queensland, where I was living at the time. And then we moved to Sydney, and we could not afford to buy in Sydney. Even 20 years ago, that was unaffordable. So we bought an investment property on the Gold Coast. And that was how we were able to stay in the market, by having a property, in another city. And as that grew in value, we were able to use that equity to be able to upgrade into a bigger home, because that was a townhouse. So I think that has always been a really viable strategy. It's been something that I think has been around for a while. It's just becoming something that more and more people are looking at when they realize that buying in your own area is maybe just off the table. And I really encourage people to look at all options and really think about what your goals are. Not everyone actually wants to own a property, but if that is a goal for you, what are all of the options available? And everything from, could you do a joint venture with a sibling? Or, could you do a joint venture with a parent? Could you buy in another state? Like, what are all of the options available to you, so that you can work out a pathway forward?
Well, I'm going to link to I was just thinking, I follow you on Instagram. You've got a lot of money tips. So I'm going to, apart from giving a link in the show notes to the Find a First Home Buyer report, give people the opportunity to keep in contact with you also about your
Wonderful.
money tips. But just
Thank
to
you.
round things off, you've given a lot of advice, thoughts, tips to people. Is there one other bit of advice that you'd give to somebody who's considering becoming a first home buyer, just nervous in the current environment?
Oh yeah, I think that it's such a big step, and I can still remember buying my first home, and we didn't have a stamp duty waiver back then, so we paid stamp duty, and it was several $1,000s. And this was 20 years ago. It was several $1,000s. It was a huge amount of money, and I remember going into the bank and getting a bank check made out to the Office of State Revenue. And I remember walking down the street back to my office, just almost in tears, because it had wiped out all of my savings, or my partner and I, all of our savings. And I thought, am I doing the right thing? I think it's so it's so normal to feel nervous and to feel stressed. Also for first home buyers, when you've been working to save a deposit, it does feel really stressful to spend it, and to see your, savings account balance go from this really high, safe amount that makes you feel good, and then see it drop. But I think whenever you're feeling those nerves and things, think ahead to future you, because the you in 10 or 20 years is going to be so happy that you had the courage and the ability to do this. So try not to let those nerves overtake you. Just try to think ahead and realize that there's, millions of people have been in this boat before you, and you'll really be so grateful for that step down the track when you've got this great asset that's growing in value and working towards building your wealth.
Who wouldn't have liked to buy the property their parents owned, the property their parents paid, the price their parents paid years ago? But if you ask your parents, it's not even worth getting in that discussion who had a tougher time then or now. But if you ask them, it was very tough, and it was always nerve-wracking then too. So Sarah, thank you for painting a clear and honest picture of what first home buyers are facing. It's sobering, it's important to understand, but I think what's clear from the Finder report is that while young homeowners still dream of owning a home, the path's getting tougher, maybe a little bit riskier, definitely emotionally charged, but there are opportunities out there. So I agree with you. Don't let the media or others scare you. Just do what most other Australians have done. 70% of Australians own their home in some degree. Some have paid it off, others haven't. Sarah, always thanks for your wisdom and your data-backed perspective.
Thank you so much. Always a pleasure.
As a way of having a bit more fun in these podcasts, I've been introducing a property trivia quiz each show. And if you're one of my regular listeners or viewers, you know that it gives you an opportunity to win a hard copy of one of my best-selling books, How to Grow a Multi-Million-Dollar Property Portfolio in Your Spare Time. Now, in a moment, I'm going to ask you a question, and today it's a simple question, and just go to propertytrivia.com.au, enter your answer, and each week 3 correct answers will win a hard copy of one of my books. Don't worry if you're listening to this as a slightly older episode, your entry will still count, and everyone's going to get a copy of a report that I've just recently updated, a property report as well. So today's question, because some of the questions are a little bit harder, is, in my mind, a simple one. What's the standard term for a mortgage in Australia? In other words, how long does it go? What's the most common term for a mortgage? Sure, there are some shorter ones. How many years? Simple question. Go to propertytrivia.com.au. Leave us your answer. I'll leave a link in the show notes so that you can go to that, and you're going to get a report, and hopefully you'll be one of the lucky ones to win a copy of my book. Before I share my popular mindset message with you, I'd like to give you a little lesson that I've learned over the last, 5 years of being involved in property. And that's that most people only realize the market has turned after it's already too late to capitalize on those early gains. And that's why I'm mentioning this to you now, because I genuinely believe we're in one of those rarer moments, a window of opportunity before the next stage of the property cycle takes off. Here's what I'm seeing. Interest rates are expected to keep falling further, likely to trigger a further surge of property buyers. Population growth is surging, but construction simply isn't keeping up. Government grants and incentives are going to be released for first home buyers at the beginning of next year. And we've already spoken about first home buyers getting in the market with Sarah just a short while ago. And across the country, rising auction clearance rates show how the depth of the market, and prices have risen. In fact, the smart money is already in the move and in the market. That's what's rising prices, pushing up prices. And when the average person finds out about it, it's those who are already in the market who have pushed the market to the next level. So what about you? Because there's the real market, that's what's happening now, and the perceived market, what the people find out when they read it in the media. So what about you? Are you clear on how to take advantage of these market conditions, or are you still waiting? Why not have a complimentary wealth discovery chat with the team at Metropole? Go to metropole.com.au. I'll leave a link in the show notes and find out. Let us help you clarify your goals. Let us help you understand how to take advantage of the macro trends that will affect your property plays. Why not allow us to help you build a personalized, data-driven property strategy? And that'll help you get ahead of the curve before all the others pile in. Go to metropole.com.au. Let's have a chat about your options.
Now here's Michael's mindset message. Remember, a change in your thinking will lead to a change in your life.
In my mindset message today, I'd like to tell you a story about the dangers of anger. And it's something I read recently about the story of the Buddha and an angry man. The story went a bit like this. One day the Buddha was walking through a village when a young man approached him and began yelling at him. "You're a fake. How can you claim you've got wisdom to teach others? You know nothing," said the young man. And the Buddha paused and smiled at the young man, which further angered him. "What do you have to say? I attack you and you just smile." And the Buddha replied, "If you buy a gift for somebody and that person doesn't accept it, to whom does the gift belong?" Well, the young man, agitated, replied, "Well, that gift would belong to him because he was the one who bought it." And the Buddha nodded and he said, "The same applies to your anger. If you come to me with anger and I choose not to accept it, the anger still belongs to you. You're the only one who is moved by it." Now, the story I'm telling you as this mindset message today offers 2 powerful lessons that I hope I get across to you. Firstly, vocalizing anger and outrage often creates more damage internally than it impacts externally, think about whether there's a more effective pathway to voice your perspective if impact is your goal. And the second lesson is if somebody comes to you with anger, always remember that you can choose not to accept it. I think both these lessons are worth contemplating as you navigate life in the days, the weeks, the months ahead. Thank you for spending the last little while with me. I hope you got some benefit from this show. But before you move on to the next podcast you're going to listen to, let me remind you I have another show that I produce once a week with leading demographer Simon Kirstenmacher. We call that Demographics Decoded, where Simon and I unveil the trends that are going to shape your future. In my mind, this is a must-listen to podcast for anyone interested in property investment, but also for business people and entrepreneurs. So if you don't currently subscribe to Demographics Decoded, just please stop for a second and subscribe on your podcast app where you're listening to this or on YouTube. And of course, if you don't subscribe to this show, the Michael Yardney Podcast, why not click the link that says follow or subscribe wherever you're listening right now. So twice a week, you're going to get benefit from my guests and me. And I'd like to ask you a little favour, please. If you did enjoy today's show and you know somebody who would also benefit, please tell them about the Michael Yardney Podcast and Demographics Decoded. There's a share button on every podcast app. On Apple Podcast, there are 3 little buttons at the top of the player. Or just tell them about it. Just have a chat with them. Now, I hope you're going to be doing them a favour, and you're definitely going to be doing me a favour in my quest to help as many people as possible to become financially literate. And by the way, I've got a special bonus for you. As my way of saying thank you for subscribing, just go to podcastbonus.com.au. There'll be a link in the show notes, podcastbonus.com.au, where I've got a bunch of ebooks and reports. It's just my way of saying thank you for taking the time to listen. And remember, the information that we give you in this podcast is general information, not specific information about your personal circumstances, because we don't know about them. But if you do want specific information, you can always have a chat with my team at Metropole. Go to metropole.com.au. If you really want to learn more, you can always listen to the previous podcast, the many episodes we've already published. Just go back to the old episodes, which each have lessons about property investment, success, and money. Once again, thanks for listening to today's show.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Michael Yardney Podcast, which was brought to you by Metropole, who help their clients grow, protect, and pass on their wealth through strategic property and wealth advice. If you like what you heard and don't already subscribe, you'll find us on iTunes or on your favourite Android app as the Michael Yardney Podcast. Watch out for our next show, which comes to you twice a week, and you'll learn some new ideas about property investment, success, and money in around 30 minutes. To get more of Michael's thoughts, go across to www.propertyupdate.com.au and sign up for his daily morning briefing, and you'll hear from not only Michael, but a group of leading property success and money experts. And just a reminder that the information you heard in this show today is general educational advice and not specific investment advice, as we don't know your personal circumstances. If you're looking for specific advice, why not ask the team at Metropole to help you?